Between takes of the most emotional gospel scene in The Preacher's Wife, something happened that made Denzel Washington's blood run cold. Whitney Houston's voice cracked on a note she could have hit in her sleep 5 years earlier. That sound, that tiny fracture in the most perfect voice God ever created, changed everything. What Denzel did next started a 15-year mission to save not just Whitney's voice, but her soul. If this story of friendship and faith moves you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever had someone try to save you from yourself. It was November 1996, and the set of The Preacher's Wife in Portland, Maine was freezing. But inside the recreation of a Harlem church, something magical was happening. Whitney Houston, the biggest voice in music, was filming her first major movie role since The Bodyguard 4 years earlier. And Denzel Washington, already considered one of the greatest actors alive, was watching her with growing concern. The first week of filming had been different. Whitney's voice had soared through the church set like it was born there, every note pure and effortless. Denzel remembered thinking she belonged in that space, not on pop radio, but in a sanctuary where her voice could serve something bigger than Billboard charts. He'd seen her face light up during the gospel rehearsals in a way it never did during the modern pop numbers. "Cut! Let's take 5, the director called after the 7th take of Whitney's big church solo scene. Denzel watched Whitney walk off set, rubbing her throat. He'd seen that gesture before, in singers at the end of grueling tours, in actors who'd been screaming for too many takes, in people pushing their instruments beyond what God designed them to withstand. As a Pentecostal preacher's son from Mount Vernon, New York, Denzel had grown up in churches where voices were considered gifts from God, sacred instruments that required care and reverence. He knew what a healthy gospel voice sounded like, and what he was hearing from Whitney wasn't healthy anymore. That night, after the crew had wrapped, Denzel knocked on Whitney's trailer door. "Come in," Whitney's voice called out, raspy and tired. Denzel entered to find Whitney sitting with a cup of tea, her vocal coach's notes spread across the small table. She looked up and smiled, but Denzel could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Whitney, can we talk?" Denzel sat down across from her without waiting for an invitation. "About your voice," Whitney's smile faltered. "What about it?" "You're hurting it," Denzel said simply. "And I think you know it." For a moment, Whitney looked like she might argue, might put on the superstar persona and dismiss his concern. But something in Denzel's face, maybe the genuine worry, maybe the lack of judgment, made her shoulders drop. "I've been touring nonstop for 3 years, Whitney admitted quietly. Exhale album, Waiting to Exhale soundtrack. This movie, planning the next album. I'm tired, Denzel. So tired." "Then why don't you stop?" Denzel asked. "You're Whitney Houston. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." "You don't understand," Whitney shook her head. "I can't just stop. There are contracts, expectations, people depending on me. My mom, my family, the label, the fans." "And what about you?" Denzel interrupted gently. "What about what Whitney needs?" That question hung in the air like smoke from church incense. Nobody had asked Whitney what she needed in longer than she could remember. Everyone asked what she could give, what she could sing, how high she could go, how perfect she could be. But what did Whitney need? She didn't even know anymore. "I want to tell you a story," Denzel said, settling back in the small trailer chair. "About 1984, I was doing a soldier's story, and I thought I had to prove I belonged. So I said yes to everything. Theater, TV, movies, all at the same time. I was going to be the hardest working actor in Hollywood." Whitney listened, her tea growing cold in her hands. "One day my mentor, an older actor I won't name, pulled me aside just like this. He said, Denzel, you're trying to build a career by saying yes to everything, but greatness comes from knowing when to say no." Denzel leaned forward. "I didn't listen. I kept pushing. And you know what happened?" "What?" Whitney asked. "I did 3 terrible movies in 1985. 3. Back to back. Movies I'm still embarrassed about today. Movies that almost derailed everything." Denzel's voice was soft but firm. "It took me 2 years to recover my reputation. 2 years of turning down money, turning down opportunities, rebuilding people's trust in my choices." Whitney was quiet, processing. Your voice isn't like acting, Whitney, Denzel continued. If I make a bad movie, I can make a better one next time. But if you damage your voice, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I'm scared, Denzel, Whitney finally whispered. I'm scared that if I stop, if I slow down, people will forget about me. There's always someone younger, someone with a fresher voice, someone ready to take my place. Denzel shook his head firmly. That's the lie this industry tells us, that we're replaceable. But Whitney, there's never been another voice like yours. Not in gospel, not in pop, not anywhere. God gave you something unique, but he also gave you the responsibility to protect it. How? Whitney's question was simple but desperate. First, you rest, really rest. Not a weekend off, I mean months. Let your voice heal. Denzel counted on his fingers. Second, you stop taking every project that comes to you. Quality over quantity. Third, you remember why you started singing in the first place. New Hope Baptist Church, Whitney said softly. I was 11. My mom was the choir director. Exactly, Denzel nodded. You sang because it brought you joy, because it brought God glory. Somewhere between that church and where you are now, it became about perfection and pressure instead of purpose. What happened in that trailer conversation became the foundation of a friendship that would last until Whitney's death 16 years later. But here's what the public never knew. Denzel didn't just give Whitney advice that night and walk away. He made a commitment. Over the next 15 years, Denzel became Whitney's unofficial guardian angel. Not in a romantic way. Denzel was happily married to his wife Pauletta, and Whitney had her own complicated personal life. But in a way that was perhaps more important. He became the voice of truth in a world that only told her yes. When Whitney's team wanted her to do 6-month world tours, Denzel would call. How's your voice? Have you rested? When record executives pushed for another album on an impossible timeline, Denzel would send care packages to the studio, tea, throat lozenges, and notes that said simply, God made your voice for marathons, not sprints. When Whitney struggled with choosing between a big money project and artistic integrity, Denzel would remind her, remember what we talked about in Portland, quality over quantity. In 2000, when Whitney was offered a starring role in a serious drama that would showcase her acting rather than just her singing, it was Denzel who encouraged her to take it seriously. You're a natural actress, Whitney, Denzel told her over dinner in Los Angeles. I saw it on The Preacher's Wife set. You don't need to sing to prove your worth. You can carry a film on your acting alone. Whitney looked at him with tears in her eyes. My whole life, I've been the voice. If I'm not that, who am I? You're Whitney Elizabeth Houston, Denzel said firmly. Daughter of Sissy, child of God, woman of faith, talented actress, generous friend. Your voice is one part of who you are. It's not the only part. That conversation shifted something in Whitney. She started talking about transitioning more into acting, about taking roles that didn't require her to sing at all, about proving herself in a different arena. But the industry and her own team had other plans. In 2002, when Whitney's voice began showing real signs of strain during live performances, Denzel was one of the first to notice. He called her immediately. Whitney, I watched your concert footage from last week. You're pushing notes you shouldn't be pushing anymore. Please talk to a vocal specialist, not your regular coach, a medical specialist. I'm fine, Denzel, Whitney insisted. Just a little tired. Whitney, Denzel's voice carried the weight of years of friendship. I've never lied to you. Don't lie to yourself. Your voice is different than it was in '96. That's okay. You're not 25 anymore. But you need to adjust your performance style to protect what you have left. Whitney was quiet on the other end of the line. Remember what I told you, Denzel continued gently. You don't have to hit the whistle notes anymore to be Whitney Houston. Your voice in the middle range is more beautiful than most people's highest notes. Trust that. Trust yourself. This conversation represented a turning point and a heartbreak because Whitney heard Denzel's words, understood them, maybe even believed them. But she was caught in a machine that demanded she be the Whitney Houston of 1985 forever, the one who could shatter glass with her whistle register and hold notes for 15 seconds without breathing. The public wanted perfection. The industry demanded it. And Whitney, raised by a mother who accepted nothing less than excellence, couldn't bear to deliver anything mediocre. By 2006, Denzel's concerns had deepened. Whitney had taken several years away from performing, and Denzel hoped she was finally resting her voice. When she announced her comeback, he reached out immediately. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Really ready? Have you been working with specialists? Adjusting your arrangements?" "I'm ready," Whitney said, and Denzel wanted to believe her. Her 2009 comeback album showed glimpses of the old magic, but Denzel could hear what the general public couldn't. The subtle adjustments, the avoided high notes, the shorter sustained passages. Whitney was managing her limitations beautifully, but they were limitations nonetheless. When Denzel finally heard the album, he called Whitney with tears in his streaming down his face. "It's beautiful," he told her. "Different than before, but beautiful. You're singing with wisdom now instead of just power. That takes courage." "You think so?" Whitney sounded vulnerable, young like the woman he'd first met in that Portland church set 13 years earlier. "I know so," Denzel assured her. "You're showing people that there's life after the whistle notes, that artistry matters more than acrobatics. I'm proud of you." That conversation was one of the last truly hopeful ones they would have. In 2011, Denzel saw Whitney at a film industry event. She looked fragile, her speaking voice raspy. When they hugged, he whispered in her ear, "How are you, really?" "Surviving," Whitney whispered back. "That's not living," Denzel said. "Come to church with Pauletta and me this Sunday. Just come sit. Let God minister to you." Whitney didn't come that Sunday, or the next, or the one after that. The last phone conversation between Denzel Washington and Whitney Houston happened 3 weeks before her death. "I'm trying to find my way back," Whitney told him. "Back to church Whitney. Back to the girl who sang because she loved it, not because contracts demanded it." "It's never too late," Denzel encouraged. "That girl is still in there. She's just been buried under years of other people's expectations." "I'm so tired, Denzel," Whitney said. And in those 4 words, Denzel heard everything she wasn't saying. The exhaustion that went beyond physical, the weariness of carrying other people's dreams on her shoulders for 30 years. "Then rest," Denzel said. "Really rest. Come stay with Pauletta and me for a month. No phones, no managers, no industry, just rest." "Maybe," Whitney said, "after this next performance, after I finish this, after—" There was always an after for Whitney. Always one more obligation, one more person to please, one more expectation to meet. On February 11th, 2012, Denzel Washington's phone rang with the news that would shatter him. Whitney Houston had been found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. She was 48 years old. Denzel didn't attend the public funeral. Instead, he sat in his home church in Los Angeles, the same church where he'd invited Whitney so many times, and wept for the voice that had been silenced, for the woman who could never quite believe she was enough without being perfect. Years later, Denzel rarely spoke publicly about Whitney, but when he did, his message was always the same. "Whitney Houston forgot something that took me years to learn. You are not your talent. Your talent is a gift God gave you, but it's not who you are. And when you make your gift your identity, when you let other people's expectations of your gift define your worth, you lose yourself." In 2019, 7 years after Whitney's death, Denzel started a mentorship program for young performers. He called it The Artist, Not the Art, a program designed to help emerging talents understand the difference between their craft and their character, between their gift and their identity. The program met every Sunday afternoon in the same church where Denzel had once invited Whitney. Each session began with silence, 5 minutes where the young artists sat without their phones, without their anxieties about streaming numbers or social media followers, just breathing and being present. Then Denzel would share stories, not just about Whitney, but about every artist he'd known who'd lost themselves in the pursuit of perfection. "I couldn't save Whitney," Denzel admitted to the program's first class of mentees, "but maybe I can save some of you. Maybe I can teach you what I tried to teach her, that the world will take everything from you if you let it. Your voice, your energy, your peace, your soul. You have to learn to say no. You have to learn to protect yourself, because nobody else will." One young singer raised her hand. "But Mr. Washington, what if saying no means disappointing people?" Denzel's answer came from years of hard-won wisdom. Then disappoint them, because the alternative is disappointing yourself, exhausting your gift, and waking up one day to find you've given everything away and have nothing left. Today, when Denzel Washington talks about The Preacher's Wife, he doesn't talk about the box office numbers or the critical reviews. He talks about the woman he met on that set, the woman with the God-given voice who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Whitney taught me something important, Denzel reflected in a recent interview. She taught me that sometimes the people who seem the strongest are the ones who most need protection. And she taught me that you can give someone all the wisdom in the world, but until they're ready to receive it, until they're ready to choose themselves over other people's expectations, that wisdom can't help them. The tragedy of Whitney Houston isn't that her voice failed. Voices change over time. That's natural, that's human. The tragedy is that she believed her worth was tied to hitting notes she'd hit at 25, that she couldn't accept the beautiful artist she could have been at 45 if she'd just allowed herself to evolve. Denzel's final words about his friend carry the weight of both love and loss. I wish Whitney had believed what I tried to tell her in that trailer in 1996, that she was more than her voice, that God loved her for her heart, not her high notes. That rest wasn't weakness, and that saying no to others sometimes means saying yes to yourself. The lessons Denzel learned trying to save Whitney Houston became the foundation of how he mentors young artists today. Protect your gift. Know when to rest. Quality over quantity. You are not your talent. Choose life over perfection. These aren't just words to Denzel. They're a promise he made to a friend he couldn't save, a promise that maybe, just maybe, he can save someone else. If Whitney's story touched your heart, share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're more than their gifts. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of faith, friendship, and the price of fame.